Hello everyone, my name is Likiswat, Assistant Dean on the Learning Network Development at Faculty of Architecture and Planning at Thammasat University. So this event is the fourth online public lectures which organized in this year. And for this time, it's our honor to host joint public lecture with our partners, the School of Creative Science and Engineering at Waseda University. With regards to several workshops that we have been organized in the past few years, we would like to carry on the discussion on the theme urban resilience, and hopefully this will broaden up some of the new ideas, especially for planning and design fields. We would like to welcome the keynote speakers, Professor Dr. Takashi ARIGA, Mei KOMATSU, and Dr. Danai Thaitakoo, as well as the online participants. And as we have discussed on the issues of urban resilience, the first topics are pictograms as proactive visual communication tools for disaster risk mitigation in multi-ethnic symbiotic communities in Tokyo will be provided by Dr. ARIGA from Waseda University. And following by the next talk, the role of agricultural space and changes of its location in Tokyo Metropolitan area by Mei KOMATSU from Waseda University as well. And then the last talk, landscape resilience, community resilience, will be discussed further by Dr. Danai. And for my part, it's a pleasure to welcome both of the keynote speakers and the online participants. If you have any questions, you can either write down on the Zoom chat and share your idea after the talk. Also, we would like to have an open discussion at the end of the lecture. There should be about 30 minutes for Q&A and open discussion. So please enjoy, and let me give the screen to ARIGA Sensei then.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank Assistant Dean, Professor Likiswat, for arranging the public lecture series today and then inviting us today. And we are very happy to join this event today. So I would like to begin with showing you some of the slides. And my talk will be probably lasting for about 20 or 20, 2-3 minutes, and then followed by one of my fellow researchers, Ms. Mei KOMATSU. So let me begin with showing you the slides. The topic I was given by Fa Sensei was urban resiliency. And then I was thinking about the theme of today's talk, and I decided to speak about, as you can see on the screen, pictograms as proactive visual communication tools in the context of disaster risk mitigations in Tokyo. And I will be talking about the reasons why I'm talking this in later. And urban resilience today, I would like to see it from the perspectives of community needs. And that means the first, understanding risk of urban disasters. And the second, examining two types of information, stock information and flow information. And the third, based upon the understandings of above, the third will be developing tools for residents' collaborations in the process of the risk mitigations. What I'm focusing on today is a case study of public, or to be exact, semi-public housing estate. It's very big public housing estate in the middle of Tokyo, located in the middle of Tokyo. How do they look? It's like 11 or 13-story high, reinforced concrete, high-rise public housing estate building types with the large open spaces, courtyard in the middle of the housing estate. And each of the dwelling units has a balcony facing to the courtyard and some playgrounds. And the location itself is very close to the big Arakawa River. It's like a Choplaya River running in the middle of the center of the Tokyo metropolitan area. And then that's why you can see the ability at the ground level because of the flood mitigations. because the architects and building engineers meant to avoid to be inundated by the flood, so that the ground floor was designed as a pilotis. And the location, like I told you, in the middle of Tokyo, and on the right-hand side, the big river running north-south this is the Arakawa River, and then on the left, this is the Sumidagawa River. So, which means the public housing estate of the case study is located in the middle of the rivers, almost like the area of facing to the river mouth. And it's very vulnerable, both by the tsunami tidal waves and also the inundations at the same time. And then the map shows you that the three type of three different public housing estate, 1 and 2 and 3, but today focusing on the first one here. And then this is a big public housing estate. Danchi has almost like 2,500 dwelling units with the almost like 10,000 residents here of Danchi. And then very close to the metro station, Ojima Metro Station. This is a metro Shinjuku line directly connected to the Shinjuku station. About 25 minutes. So it's very good locations for the commuting to the central part of Tokyo. That's why this shows you that population nodes of foreign nationalities in the metropolitan Tokyo. Of course, there are a variety of nationalities, but for example, the Chinese, Koreans, and Indians, and the other nationalities. But in this case study area here, you are Ojima Rokuchome public housing estate. Here is one of the nodes of the large Indian populations over more than maybe 30 years now. At the same time, you can see the risk levels of earthquake damage. The lengths of the risk level are defined by the complex evaluations, not just only about collapse of the wooden housing, but also including the risk of fires, or a risk of difficulties of fire or evacuation routes. And so the evaluation will be or the risk levels are defined by the variety of factors. But here is the case study area, and it's in the area of a very high levels of earthquake damage, and also at the same time the high risk of the flooding, inundation risks as well. So both fire, earthquake, and then the floods. And when you look at from the air, this is a kind of a bird's eye, three-dimensional bird's eye view, but there are still large areas of old wooden structures, 2-story high, 3-story high wooden structures with very narrow alleyway network systems. And then so the urban blocks here and there, a very high density of populations, and then narrow public streets. So which means they are very vulnerable again against the fires and earthquakes, and also the floods. And then here on the above, you can look at the 11 and 13-story high reinforced concrete public housing complex here with the large open spaces, courtyard systems. Here are the case study area. So as you can see, we are looking at the possibilities and potentials of the courtyard open spaces as the place where the possible future evacuatable places for not just only the residents of public housing estate, but for the residents outside of the danchi, the public housing estate in the area, neighborhood as well. But the problem is how we can manage to make those courtyard systems, courtyard places available for the large numbers of the residents outside of the city as well. And also another issue we have to look at is that since the area is very lowland, the average altitude of these neighborhood is minus 0 meter from the sea level, so that the vertical evacuations are necessary, and there are no effective methods available of thinking about the vertical evacuations. So now I'm going to show you another images of the area. This is the three-dimensional maps showing you that the risk of flood. I'm just zooming out, but this is Tokyo Bay, and this is basically the metropolitan regions. And then the case study area, now you can look at in zoom in, and then this is Arakawa River, this is Sumidagawa River, and then the river mouth here, and then the area colored in brown means that that high risk flood area. The worst case would be the flood comes around 4 meter high or 4.5 meter high above the ground level, which means the second floor or sometimes third floor will be flooded. And then the public housing estate is just here. So you can get the sense how dense the surrounding neighborhoods are, and then how and also the potential of possibility of the open spaces can be, I mean, courtyard system can be the open space for the evacuations for the neighborhood as well. Okay, I'm returning to the slides. And this is the shot taken from that three-dimensional model. And then this is a zoom up image showing you that the proportion of the danchi, public housing estate, as opposed to the surrounding old wooden structure, high dense population area. And then, so the main theme here is that we are going to develop the pictograms in hope of using that evacuations to the public housing estate for the residents surrounding the communities. And also the non-verbal communication tools will be very useful and important for the foreign nationalities living in the large public housing estates because of the no verbal or linguistic barriers. Then I'm a little bit explaining about the two types of problems regarding the informations, because here you can see that two types of informations. One is flow informations, and then second is stock informations. Basically, the stock information is that the informations we expect that all the residents have already known that or getting used to that. But yes, this is true for in the case of the Japanese residents, because most of the Japanese residents started to learn the risk of natural disasters when they were a kid. I mean, at the elementary schools, and how they learned also how to evacuate and how to save their lives in practical activities. But the foreign nationalities and foreign residents usually do not so much accustomed to the Japanese kind of types of natural disasters, including not just only about the earthquake, but also the floods and inundations. So the flow informations will not be working well for those who have not yet accustomed to the stock informations, which means, simply saying that if the municipal government or central government announced that the risk of the disaster, expected in the near future, they do not mean effective, meanings to the people, those who do not have stock informations. So how we could provide and how we could make the useful stock informations for those who are not managed to speak or read and communicate in Japanese, but for everybody. So, and at first, the laboratory and the students did a questionnaire surveys, and then like to the foreign residents, asking several elements regarding stock information and the flow informations. Like you now looking at the result of the questionnaires. For example, some of the foreign residents already know that the case study area, Koto district, Koto ward, is kind of facing to the risk of the flooding because of they are located the 0 meter above the sea level. They knew it. And then some of the foreign residents also know that public housing estates can be or will be used as a site for the temporary shelter for the residents in an emergency case. And then, yeah, some of the foreign residents knew it, but some others do not. Like this, we have to define and make clear that what kind of information will be necessary and in what timing. What timing means that now you can see that the timeline of the earthquake disaster, for example. On the left, this is a normal day, normal life. And when the earthquake occurs, then first phase 1 will be to protect their own lives, of course. And then the second phase will be they evacuated to the temporary shelters. And then, settle down in a temporary shelter, their evacuation lives will be sometimes getting longer and longer, sometimes over the years. And then, they will start to prepare the restorations and the recovery of their lives, in the long shot. The same things, happening, but different timeline happening to the flood or inundation damage. Because different from the earthquake, flood can be anticipated or anticipated in advance. So the government or municipal government usually announce the preparation of the evacuations before the actual flood is occurring. So residents, should be knowing that what to do and where to go. And actually, when the flood is happening, then the situation will be very difficult for the residents to move or to go to the shelters because of the ground floor will be flooded, and the worst case will be 4 meter high, 4 meter deep. So they can't walk on the street, or they can't move on the ground. That's why the vertical evacuation will be very, very necessary. And so the next step will be, you can see the type of disaster and then purpose of communicating information, and then pictograms on the right hand. And according to the evacuation timeline on the horizontal, or I'm sorry, vertical flows. And in the case of earthquake, in the case of flood and inundations, a little bit different. Because like I told you, in the case of flood and inundations, usually it can be anticipated in advance to the happening. Sorry. And then disaster occurring and the temporary evacuation, and the evacuation life will be sometimes getting longer. And then the evacuation shelter will be set sometimes using in the public facilities like a big gymnasiums or the schools. And but the flood, in the case of flood, like I introduced, the high-rise public housing estate can be used as a temporary shelters for the residents outside of the danchi. Okay? And then so, according to the timelines, each of the steps, each of the different kind of information will be necessary. And then so non-verbal communications, pictograms can be also fitting to each of the needs of to make easier for the people who are evacuating in the shelter understands what to do, how to do, and how to help or how to support with each other as a community. So the pictogram has a different kinds of set or different kinds of purposes according to the set. And then we developed in the design workshop with the foreign residents. Actually, that was in the 2 years ago, 2019, because of since last year we couldn't do on the workshop on the site because of the COVID-19. So, but anyway, so like this, this was shot in 2019 in working in the community rooms of the public housing estate, and the students are guiding and the students are supporting the facilitating the design workshop with the foreign residents and the kids and senior elderly citizens, and to figure out what kind of design of the pictograms can be or should be working. This is just an example, and using some of the existing pictograms, but some of the pictogram doesn't work well for the foreign residents because they're meaning nothing. For example, in a shelter, and the food is very important. But when the foreign residents look at one of the pictograms case showing that onigiri, it's a rice bowl, rolled by the seaweed, Japanese rice bowl, doesn't mean anything to the foreign residents. What is that? Like that. So not just only about the existing pictograms, but customizing for the best non-verbal communication tools will be very important. Working with the residents, and also pictograms can be used for the normal life, daily lives, in in making the residents aware of what they have to do if the disaster happening, and where they can be moving up on the floor to the floors, and then. Based upon the pictograms we developed last year in the 2020, even in the situation of COVID-19, the students organized the online design workshop using a software called Miro on the online, and to find out more practical spaces and places in the real public housing estate buildings, to see how large of the spaces will be necessary for example, stock yard in an emergency kit, or how large of the common spaces will be available for the evacuation space as evacuation spaces for the residents outside of the danchi when the disaster happening to move in. So this is the real calculations of the space-wise And then the result was like, for example, there are a variety of spaces needed for the purpose of the space for the stock of the emergency kits and food or any kind of necessities, different types. And then they figure out that, for example, the 195 square meter will be the best fit and the best fit to the one, for example, one building. But 195 square meters in the common space, not in the private housing dwelling unit, but in the common space, including hallways or elevator hall or something like that, will be demanding. And as a total, 4 floors will be necessary as the one kind of a group unit of evacuation spaces. So, which means that let's say, if the 11-story high buildings, then 2 vertical group unit of evacuation space can be available, because one group unit of evacuation space consumes like 4 floors. So that is kind of a calculations. And then using a 3-dimensional model, but in the online design workshop, so on the screen, I mean, the residents can have an opportunity to say their opinions and ideas where those for example, evacuation unit can be located, or how large, based upon that calculations, by using the flag or something like that. And then an online design workshop works for finding out the proportion and distributions of the these evacuation places. So I'm almost time is running up. So I'm finished here. But this is some of the result of questionnaires, and then. As a result of the workshop, both Japanese residents and the foreign nationalities found out that these 3 key elements will be very, very important to be prepared. First is the infirmary, and then cafe is a place for everybody to getting together, and then to exchange information in a daily life, and also the pier, that's for the small boat, because the ground floor cannot be used when the flood is occurring, because 3 meter, 4 meter is be flooded. So this is the whole process of the pictograms, and also the related design workshops, online workshops, in the case of evacuations due to the flood and the earthquakes. Okay, thank you very much. I'm stopping here. Thank you so much for your listening.
So thank you very much, ARIGA Sensei, for sharing the case studies, especially I think in the kind of like multi-ethnic communities that dealing with also multi-risks and disasters in the terrain of Tokyo. So I think this will lead to a very fruitful and also challenging discussion at the end of the session. So now let's move on to the next topic, which I'm pretty sure that we can also hear more about the role of agricultural space and changes in Tokyo from Mei KOMATSU. So Mei, do you want to share your screen?
Yes, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So at first, I would like to thank you for inviting me here today. I am conducting research on agriculture and urban areas in Professor ARIGA's laboratory. Today, I would like to make a presentation on how we can think about agriculture as a part of urban resilience. I will start my presentation now. The title is The Role of Agriculture Space and Changes of Its Location in the Tokyo Metropolitan Area. In considering about agriculture as urban resilience, I would like to talk about three contents. The first is the role of agriculture in urban areas and its potential as resilience. And the second is transformation of agricultural land in urban areas. Finally, I would like to talk about case studies of agriculture spaces as urban resilience. Now let's start with the first. As a basic premise, agriculture in Japan is facing serious problems due to the aging of farmers and the lack of successors. The situation is the same with agriculture in urban areas. As shown in this graph, according to a survey by Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, more than 60% of the key farmers are over 65 years old. In addition, the population of farmers is decreasing year by year, and it is very difficult to keep agricultural land. Under such circumstances, the multifaceted functions of agriculture have been emphasized in Japan since around 2000. The multifaceted functions of agriculture include local production for local consumption and the creation of changes among people. In Japan today, the preservation of urban agricultural land is being attempted as an important element to enrich people's lives in this age of shrinkage. The demand for agriculture as an outdoor hobby is increasing, especially since the coronavirus infection has decreased people's enjoyment. Many of the existing examples are aimed at enriching people's lives. Among them, there are cases for self-realization that aim to experience agriculture itself, and cases for social realization that aim to revitalize the community and preserve the natural environment. With these various stages of agriculture and urban area, people can choose the way in which they prefer to be involved in agriculture. So, what kind of risks can urban agriculture flexibly respond to as urban resilience? This graph is from the Global Risks Report 2021, 16th edition, published by World Economic Forum. The vertical axis shows impact and the horizontal axis shows likelihood. By utilizing the functions of urban agriculture, we believe that we can flexibly respond to social risks such as mental health deterioration and social cohesion erosion. It will also have an important effect on environmental risks such as biodiversity loss and natural resource crisis. In this way, agriculture in urban areas is one way for people to enrich their lives, but at the same time, it has the power to respond to social and environmental risks. Alternatively, it may be that living a rich life equals driving urban resilience. Next, let's move on to the second one. In fact, during the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, the city center of Tokyo was called Edo. Edo was famous as a rural city. This is a map of Edo with the castle at the center and the waterways running through the city. In this era, when transportation networks and technology were not developed, vegetables were grown in Edo and the immediate surroundings of Edo. And city residents ate freshly picked vegetables on a daily basis. In Edo, a food infrastructure was formed that could feed the population of Edo. It is also said that cyclical agriculture was carried out through a network between urban and rural areas. The exchange of vegetables for urban garbage that could be used as fertilizer also led to the beautification of the city. These pictures were drawn in the Edo period. In the picture on the left, radish produced in Edo is presented to the Lord. Good vegetables growing in Edo had great value to the people. People who came to the work in the city also brought cheese from their hometowns and grilled them. For them, vegetables were a source of comfort. The picture on the right is an ukiyo-e by Utagawa Hiroshige, a famous Japanese painter, showing a landscape with fields. Since there were no parks in Edo, agricultural land was one of the most valuable open space in the city. However, the amount of agricultural land is rapidly decreasing with urbanization, especially during the period of rapid economic growth. Much of the urban agricultural land was converted to housing. This chart shows the location of agricultural land in urbanized area in Tokyo and its surroundings area in 1983 and 2016. We can see that the amount of agricultural land is decreasing not only in the central part of the city, but also the whole area. Nevertheless, in fact, there is still a lot of agricultural land dotting the Tokyo metropolitan area. There are 532 hectares of agricultural land and 1,455 farming households left in the Tokyo metropolitan area. You can see the agricultural land in red in the figure, which is just a short distance away from our Waseda University and the famous tourist spot Shibuya. When you hear the words Tokyo metropolitan area, you may think of modern architecture like this, Olympic Stadium, and skyscrapers like the one in the background. But there are still many such agricultural lands mixed with urban areas in the walls of Tokyo. The agricultural land in this photo is being used as a public garden. This is the agricultural land that farmers are still cultivating today in their urban area. As you can see, full-scale agriculture is being carried out in a large area. This photo also shows agricultural land where farmers continue to cultivate their crops, with houses and lawns in the background. You can see that the residential buildings and the agriculture spaces are very close. I think this mixed farming and living situation is a great attraction for cities. We used quantitative data to analyze this mixed agricultural land and residential situation. We will clarify what kind of agricultural land is located in what kind of cities and towns. First, here is a classification of cities and towns according to the degree of urbanization. Based on the results of the principal component analysis, we categorize the cities and towns into 4 categories. On the horizontal axis, the more this side of the graph, the percentage of owner-occupied houses, the nuclear families, the single-family houses, and the people who have lived in the city for a long time are higher. On the other hand, land prices and higher here, and the urbanized area occupies a larger percentage of the total area. On the vertical axis, the more this side, upper side of the graph, the greater the flow of people, such as the employee locations far away, and the number of new residents is high. This result is plotted on a map in the figure on the left. Orange, red, blue, and green are plotted in order to the increasing urbanity. Next, we classify the words according to the distance of agricultural land from urban and natural infrastructure. The horizontal axis shows the distance between urban infrastructure and agricultural land, and the vertical axis shows the distance between natural infrastructure and agricultural land. The urban typology and the agriculture typology are superimposed as shown in the figure. The words in category 3, the orange one, are the most urbanized group, but there are words where the distance between urban and natural infrastructure and agriculture land is close. The map on the upper right shows the locations of the wards. From the above, we can see that urban agricultural land has been randomly converted to residential land and disappeared. But as a result, there are wards where agricultural land did not separate from either urban or natural infrastructure in Tokyo metropolitan area. Finally, I would like to talk about case studies of agriculture spaces as urban resilience. As I mentioned in the first part, there are many different ways to interact with agriculture in cities. Some of them people do everything from planting seeds to harvesting by themselves, while others only experience harvesting. Some use farmers' agricultural land, some use vacant lots, and some use rooftops. Some of them people pay money to rent a plot, participate as volunteers as part of environmental conservation efforts, and receive authentic instruction to become a farmer. Among them, I would like to introduce 3 advanced examples today. The first, case 1, a community cafe that supports the health of the elderly by utilizing agricultural land. This case is a combination of a rental apartment and an agricultural land owned by the owner. The first floor of the apartment has been revitalized as a care facility for the elderly and has become a place for the elderly, parents and children in the community. The agricultural land is mainly farmed by volunteers. They provide harvesting experience for the elderly residents of the care facility and nearby nursery schools. This photo shows the children's fields. Vegetables from these fields are served for lunch at the care facility. And also local mothers learn how to cook and how to raise their children from the elderly. We can see various community exchanges through the vegetables for the fields. It can be said that this is an advanced example of cooperation between agriculture and welfare. The second one is renovation of old rental housing and the proposal of a new way to live in the city through the establishment of new agriculture space. By renovating an old wooden rental apartment, a spacious house with a vegetable garden and a common room was created. Many of these wooden apartments were built in the 1960s and 1970s, and nowadays young people are attracted to the Japanese style layout and often renovate them to live in. In this case, an attractive space has been created by utilizing an underutilized outdoor space. All the plants in this corridor can also be eaten. Before the project, 6 of the 8 houses were vacant, but now they are always fully occupied. In addition to the vegetable garden, the creation of the common space has promoted interaction among the residents. Their common space has a library space and a kitchen, where residents hold dinner parties and other events. The third is creating a place that is open to the community by sharing agricultural space. This is a so-called rental farm, but the atmosphere of the field is so good that even though I am in the center of Tokyo, I feel as if I'm in the countryside. The land is originally owned by a farmer who used to grow flowers and plants, and the workspace and the barn are open to the public. By using this land to actively hold local events, such as marches, they are creating interaction among the students. In general, rental farms only divide the plot efficiently, but in this case, the agricultural land is planted like a park, with the engineers planting and zoning based on the concept of landscape architects. Even if it's a corona disaster, it is an extremely valuable environment for children to play in a safe. I have talked about the potential of agriculture as an urban resilience. I believe that not only preserving agriculture, which is an important element for cities, but also proactively planning, developing, and maintaining it is important for forming resilient cities. Thank you for listening.
So thank you, Mei, for giving a very clear points on the value of revitalizing the agricultural landscape as well as the vacant space in the fringe of Tokyo. So now we would like to hear more from Dr. Danai on the linkage between landscape and community resilience. Ajahn Danai, would you like to share your screen?
Okay, so would like to start my talk. It would be about the landscape resilience, community resilience. So from my background as an ecologist, so looking at the word resilience, the word landscape and community, it's differently. So I'm looking at, well, first I would like to looking at what the basic question is. So there are two questions. What is resilience and what is landscape? So to start finding an answer or explanation to the two questions, I would like to start with a basic logic to look at what the issue that we're dealing with. We are in Anthropocene, or we spending our life more anthropocentric. So I would like to start with the way of how we are looking at the human system. So to begin with the working model of the human ecosystem, looking at these model to look at when the scientists look at the human as a part of ecosystem, look at the human ecosystem, look at the critical resource and human social system interacting each other, and then Pickett change the perspective a little bit. That's kind of to which change it. So the Pickett look at the human ecosystem, in terms of ecosystem infrastructure as the base, as the foundation, and then you have a resource system that mixing, the resource system is mixing between the foundation, ecosystem structure, and processes, and then the human system is a cultural resource and socio-economic resources, and then human social system that I look at it as a motivation, the drive of how human interact with the ecosystem. So it's social institutions, social cycle, social orders. I'm sorry. So I'm looking at those theories and combined with the idea, the logic of ecological footprints. So I'm looking at the ecosystem structure and processes as a foundation of what the human social system, social economics, or resource and cultural resource, cultural system in terms of triangle. Try to interpret the concept of ecological footprint, and then look at these and then try to link out these theory to the landscape. So you have biophysical natural landscape and socioeconomics and cultural landscape overlaid on these biophysical landscape. And then that what's the view of the world and the view of the landscape. And now we're gonna look at what does it mean in terms of the resilience? Yeah, from C.S. Holdings, resilience and stability of ecological system. So this is quite long, but basically he tried to look at that, try to explain, the system and change the idea from stable system to the system that change all the time. So there no such a thing, that we try to find equilibrium or stability, but the system is always, change all the time. For example, he might say, more owls, fewer mice, fish population wax and wane as a natural condition. So all the population species come and goes, more and less and extinction is normal and regular. So the system is not rarely would be in a stable state, but it's always changed. So so he changed the idea from a stable system into a more equilibrium, natural, undisturbed system to something that it's constantly change. That the view of the ecosystem. So that with the resilience is coming into the place, how the system respond to change and adapt or change or improve the system according to all kind of change. So I just want to make it a little bit quicker and look at the definition of the landscape. Landscape, the context in which the biological, the cultural, and biophysical all interact and unfold into large manifestation of life and growth, of expression and renewal. And then look at landscape are dynamics. Change is norm. Change as a universal law is highlighted in landscape. Organizational change or nature evolving as defined by Holling is evolutionary change of the landscape. Evolutionary change is a result of the response of the landscape to internal biophysical variability and external variability. Evolutionary change processes a natural rhythm of change created by the development of internal process and structure as response to external variabilities. These rhythm of change are characterized as alternate periods of increasing organization and stasis, with periods of reorganization and renewal. Consequently, rhythm determine the degree of productivity and the resilience of the landscape. So, this is from ecological point of view. Try to look at what does it mean resilience. So resilience is embedded. It's an internal quality characteristic of the system. And then the other interpretation, resilience, the amount of change the system can undergo and still retain the same control on function and structure, the degree to which the system is capable of self-organization, the ability to build and increase the capacity for learning and adaptation. Landscape dynamics, resilience, and adaptation. Adaptive capacity of a socio-ecological system is its ability to experience perturbation, shocks, and all inputs, and still remain in a given domain of attraction. That domain has environmental, social, and economic dimensions, and hence relate to the idea of sustainability. Adaptive capacity is the ability to respond to alteration in a way that retain its overall structure and functional processes. Adaptive capacity is closely related to resilience and reflect the ability of a system to adjust to changing conditions. It is an evolutionary concept that recognizes that fixed stability is unlikely in biological and social system, but that the component interaction and feedbacks can offer alter in ways that maintain system identity and identifiable or desirable functions. And talking about the resilience, so I would like to introduce the word landscape health. Landscape health as the capacity of the land for self-renewals. Ecosystem health as the ability to maintain a stable level, a state that enables an ecosystem to maintain its ongoing processes, change and development, maintaining its organization and autonomy over time with resilience to stress, without interruption from human activities. And then from Christian's ones, resilient landscape, combining combining influential landform, life-giving. I'm sorry. landform life-giving water bodies and native species with the crops, structure, and sculpture of human culture. Landscape are the living, breathing containers of biocultural diversity. The landscape is the context in which the biological, the cultural, and the biophysical all interact and unfold into lush manifestation of life and growth, of expression and renewal. In a resilient landscape, the diversity of life and the elements thrive together in a dance of coevolution and regeneration, resulting in an interconnected system that it is resistant to shock and adaptive to change. Resilient landscape keep the engine of life humming. From the mountain to the land seascape, unique landscape spawn unique culture and liveways, distinctive language and crops, keystone species and delicious flavor of foods. Biocultural landscape are the ultimate amalgamation of people and place, critical in the formation of cultural identity and the maintenance of biodiversity. Luxuriant, resilient landscape also provide invaluable ecosystem services, such as forest filtered drinking water and the decomposition of waste. And they contain that important elements of wild nature, the ecosystem of intangible value unshaped by humans. By thinking in landscape terms, we are able to incorporate several important disciplines in our work, from conservation biology and ethnobotany to geology and anthropology. So from that set of logics and theories, so we start, so we're looking at the place in the northern part of Thailand. It's a Sopli village. So we lead a team of students from the Department of Landscape Architecture to Memon Valley in Lampang Province, northern Thailand, to survey a landscape structure, functions, and dynamics. Oops. So this is what we work on site, talk with Pu Yai Ban, the head of the village. And then, we did 3 site visits and then came back to Bangkok to work on what the information and the logic and the theory we have, and try to understand the rural landscape. And this is the work in the studio. Okay. With landscape dynamics in mind, we observe the human adaptation and livelihood pertaining to the landscape in headwater region. Specifically, we are focusing on Ban Sopli village, which is a part of Memon Valley. As a place, Ban Sopli mean confluence li, where merely tributary meet the mainstream Memon. They are a part of tributary network of Wang River that characterize the landscape of these small valley and villages. The Wang is an important tributary which cascades down the mountains of northern Thailand to the Chao Phraya River basin. Sopli situated on a gentle slope foothill at the confluence of Memon and Meli streams of Memon Valley. Ban Sopli is dictated by seasonal cycle of precipitation and streamfall. The valley landscape and the dynamics flow of water created by the eco-hydrological dynamics of Memon Basin. Between May and October, southwest monsoon bring rains from the Indian Ocean north to the mountain range, bringing a mountain landscape whose runoff feeds the Memon Basin and bring rhythm to life, putting into motion human cycle of planting, harvesting, as well as shaping local belief and ritual. So this is the foothill, the river terrace, and the floodplain, the small floodplains, and the rice paddy, the mountains. And we visit in some place they start to go corn, but majority do still rice farming. And the traditional irrigation ditch and the landscape of river terraces and rice paddy. Ban Sopli, a rice growing community sustained through extended family household who respond to changing market and technological conditions through an integrated system based upon complex socio-cultural foundation for about a century. Possibly community gathering, transplanting rice, culture, and intricate indigenous local water structure and management practice of indigenous Mueang Phai. So you can see, you know, the traditional ways. And you know, they're using, because the topographical feature of this is the river terrace and floodplain. So you have a slope, you know, foothill. So they have these kind of the system of modification, the water management, small weirs, large weir, to bring the water into the rice paddies. And these kind of integrate water system. So you can see like a small viaduct up here, you know, to move the water from one rice paddy to another, and then the main irrigation just flow through that, and a more cooperative, you know, working together, helping each other. And these mushroom is a product of the forest in the mountains around the communities. Several old temples, both in the valley and at the top of the hill, represent the symbiosis, wealth, respect, admiration, durability, and longevity of these valley foothill communities, and represent the adaptability and sustainability of human settlements and activities through modifying and maintain the valley and surrounding mountain landscape, and the ecological service that support communities and human well-being. This is, you know, we just walk to these the village and look at what, you know, the change in the village. The religious belief integrates sufficiency philosophy upon way of life at the community or organization level based on cooperative activities with their neighbors within community on the ground of a concept of sharing access resource of each household, a pre-modern locally controlled human ecosystem watershed model structure and sustain these valley for around a century. And a mixed traditional combined with an inherent Hindu Buddhism cosmological framework create a tributary culture for a local managed forest and agriculture production society with a Thamma king as a symbolic lord of life symbolized through water. So this is what we're looking at, lowland, floodplain, and river terrace, rice paddies, and the foothill village. The confluence, so we look at what the combination, you know, the four major factors here is forest, soil, water, and rice paddies meet each other in these communities. And then we analyze the natural landscape, ecological infrastructure, and human modify a natural landscape. The mountain, the floodplain, the river terrace, the stream, the riparians. And humans start to modify by managing the flow of the water, create these kind of integrated complex irrigation system in rice paddies. So they actually create bands of resilient, performative, socio-cultural ecological system. This socio-cultural ecological process creates self-sustaining agricultural landscape based upon self-reliance and self-sufficient at the household level. Increasing the sustainability of farming system involve utilizing holistic way of managing practice that have multiple benefits. And what happened in Bansobli is very similar to the Japanese way of Satoyama. And as a result of combining appropriate new technology and local wisdom, so we're looking at the landscape characteristic and how we kind of strengthened in terms of when the heat. So we suggest of how we can strengthen all these natural berms and look at the flood, and then to reduce the erosion in the stream in case of the big storm hit, and then just use a local plant material, local materials, and helping them, dealing with this kind of unexpected event. And looking at what the traditional via or phi, so they raise the level of the water in the main river and divert water into the irrigation canal to feed the rice paddy. So we experiment on improving the function of these traditional weir by creating a series of weirs with opens, create a cascade flow. So allow the flow of the water that can flow. So would be reconnect the stream without changing the effect of weir to get to divert the water into the rice paddies, but you allow the fish to flow upstream. So you reconnect all these natural system more, that the fish can move from downstream to upstream. So we are looking at what the traditional system is and then try to improve that. And so what the system, the existing system, and then we try to improve what we can help the existing system to be more efficient and strengthen that in terms of when a disaster, the big storm hit the area. And then we're looking at what the schedule, the timetable, or these the farm almanacs. So they're growing different vegetable, different time of the year, and looking at the schedule. So they utilize the landscape, the season, the water availability in these type of farmland, farming almanacs differently. And so food safety and security for farmer household, maintaining farm resource and environmental quality, and deriving reasonable profit from farm investment can be achieved. And then in the community itself, we're looking at more the community infrastructure in terms of transportation, the land area, the plot, and to see what we can deal with that when the problem of high rainfall or in event of a storm hit. So we try to look at how to detain or slow the flow of the water, and then keep it in the area that benefit the community and reduce the risk of a flash flood. So looking at all these kind of a more gray and green infrastructure compared to a green infrastructure of natural landscape infrastructure. And then the infrastructure of the small irrigation dish to control the flow and to slow the flow. And then that's what the indigenous knowledge and local wisdom of the traditional farming in terms of recognizing and understanding the landscape and its environment has been accumulated through time and has been inbuilt and further developed into the way of life in the villages, aiming towards sufficiency and sustainability future in terms of living in concert with nature. The indigenous knowledge and local wisdom based upon the resilient performative capacity of the ecosystem. The village scholar, the living treasures, and their leadership play a major role in transferring and passing on the invaluable knowledge to the next generation regarding sustainable development. And this is, we come to at the end of this talk, the lesson learned. We look at these, what lesson we learned from our research and our studio. So we're looking at the educational practice and challenge, the case of landscape planning and design studio. So we look at two sides of our studio. One side is design and the other side is design. So the side is research, design is a plan and also planning. So the process of science is first is projection, looking at what's going to happen, what happened now and then what going to happen, and then model that kind of type of change and the process. And then so we have the understanding of what the process and the effect of the process. And then it's bring in the understanding of the size and the people. That what we start without the process, and then we looking at what we would plan and design from the understanding of the site and the people, and then look at the projection, what happening now and then what going to happen in the future, and then we create the model of change. So it's the design and planning, and then these process would going in the loop. So the next would be science, would be evaluation and assessment, and then we start these the loop again, because change is norm. So the projection, model, understanding, and then so we are into the design and the redesign. So this is more like the process of the cycle of the process that going on and on. So it's more like unfinished project, but it's more adaptive process. Try to so what the problem is looking at what the future is and how we can live with the landscape. And this is what our view of the landscape. So landscape resilience is mean the community resilience. And then when look at the urban area and the rural area, for my triangle, the rural is ecological footprint. So if we are discussing urban resilience, we cannot ignore the area that support urban life is a rural area. So that's our focus in this studio. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Danai, for sharing some of the concept of the landscape resilience, which link to the community resilience. And you also highlight two keywords, I think. One is the landscape dynamic, and the other one is change is norm. So I think by looking at the case studies of Ban Sop Lee, we could have like more discussion at the end of the section. So now I think we have some of the question from the floor. Let me bring some of the question to the three speakers first. I think I'll go back to the question to Professor ARIGA. So Professor Kim is asking two questions. So the first one is what was the duration of flooding for which design scenario and stock flow analysis done for? And the second question is how are emergency service agencies integrated into the design? So
yes,
yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much for your question. In the case study, we simulated the lengths of timelines, including the flooding period, as at least flooding itself will be lasting at least for a month, at least a month. But like I introduced in the slides, the average depth of the flood comes around more than or higher than the 2.5 or 3. They sometimes reached to 4.5 and 5 meter, which means that the old wooden structure of Japanese houses, second-story houses, will be completely flooded. And in that case, the time period to accomplish the recovery or restorations of the residents' lives and works and the normal social lives will be probably taking more than of course more than a year, 1 year, or maybe sometimes and some of the residents will give up to return to their original homes, but to get out of that area to find out safer, easier places to restore their lives. And then that in that case, some proportion of the residents will never return to that place. So in that sense, the effect of the flooding will be lasting very long time period, I believe. But technically speaking, in the simulation, in the case study, like I mentioned, the flood will be lasting at least 4 weeks. I mean, 1 month, and then after water will be drained, then all the structures, wooden structures, or the flooded facilities needs to be. But some of the steel constructions or reinforced concrete construction will be can be recovered. But in the many old wooden structures should be maybe rebuilt or renovated, not just only cleaned out or not just only removed of the garbages, but maybe structure itself themselves can be really damaged. So in that case, after the water be drained, even the recovery process takes more than 1 year, and then so that is the basic timelines we estimated in the case study, the simulations, and basically speaking, in Japan, there is no permanent emergency agencies like FEMA in the United States, because each of each of the time of the disasters, including a Great Tohoku earthquake disaster 2011, the central government set up the laws, special laws, temporary laws, special laws, not permanent laws, but special laws, to be able to establish the emergency or restoration agencies, which can handle the variety of different policies or support and assistance and subsidies to the devastated people in an area for recoveries. But those laws are limited laws. I mean, specially enacted laws, not permanent laws. So which means that there is no, theoretically speaking, there is no permanent emergency agencies in Japan. But of course, the Diet and the House have argued and discussed the needs of the permanent laws to be able to enable that the municipal government or central government to set up permanent agencies. But up to now, there is no permanent agencies. In that sense, basically, the restoration budget is provided by the central government, and then distributed to the local municipal authorities, making them be able to manage the recovery constructions and then the recovery businesses and communities and so on and so on. Sometimes allows the municipal government to develop the new communities on the highlands, where no risks of the tsunami or floods, but and facilitate relocations of the residents, whole villages or townships. But in the practical process of the restorations of people's lives or community lives, usually the professionals and sometimes university professors get involved in the practical places and communities and neighborhood to help to organize the group of the people and the residents to come up with their recovery or restoration plans for the future, and then support the consensus makings, and then to propose to the mayors or governors to approve, to implement that the recovery process or recovery project based upon the money provided by the central government. So the emergency service agencies, in this sense, support and help the municipal governments to facilitate the residents involved consensus making in the process of making the restoration plan and the project by law. Yeah, that's how it works. But it's not the perfect. It's not the perfect, of course. Yeah, it's not the perfect. Sometimes, even in professionals cannot fully understand or cannot fully reflect local or localities or local uniqueness of the devastated area, and then that resulted in the cookie cutter universal plan of the restorations, regardless the uniqueness of the localities or communities. Yeah, that's happening a lot. Yeah.
Okay, I think Professor ARIGA have like 2 more questions for you from Professor Bunanand. So the first question is, one of the key elements in building community resilience in social capital. So can you please explain how multi-ethnic groups of residents residing within the nearby the case studies could be linked through social interaction to actually increase level of preparedness to future disasters?
Yes. Thank you for the questions. The first of all, the situation of the communities in the case study area around is one of the very aging neighborhoods in the Tokyo metropolitan area, including many elderly Japanese citizens and residents. And the elderly citizens are the group of the people need support when the disaster happening. And then, as opposed to the foreign nationalities, foreign residents are pretty important in terms of not as a recipient of the support and the assistance, but also they are very important group of people who can lead to fill the gap between the multi-ethnic or multilinguistic communities and also the aging Japanese residents as well, because many of the Japanese elderly citizens live alone, single family, single person family types. So I believe that it does not necessarily to be a permanent resident, but the long-term foreign residents are very important role in this case as well, and especially in the middle of the Tokyo, because there are lots of the aging communities as well. And
so the second one is about the leadership. So as it's a part of human capital, so
right,
in the case study, how does the role of leadership in ethnic communities would play and link to the stage of managing?
But talking about the leadership, it's not be happening only in the emergency times, but it's very important to look at the leadership in the normal daily lives, because usually the many foreign residents in this community area play also a very important role in, for example, the daily businesses or daily activities connected to the local neighborhoods. And so the daily, normal daily lives and leaderships is, I believe, that the more than important, just in case of the emergency or disasters, I think. And then the important issues. What's important here is that as a professional or as a university faculties or professors, us, we should be able to support and coordinate them, I mean the foreign residents, to have an opportunities to look at for the future. I mean, in the case of emergency, how they can support or how they can play a role in advance to the disaster happening in a daily life. That will be, I believe that is very important role to community resiliency in this, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Professor ARIGA. I think let me also ask the question to Mei. So we have, I think, a couple of questions. So the first one is from Professor Bunanan as well. So as empty land in Tokyo is invaluable, so who own those empty land? Would it be private or public sectors, and how collectively in community practice can be seen in realities, everyday basis or occasionally?
Professor Nanan, I appreciate your question. For the first one, most of the vacant land is privately owned, and in very rare cases, the government buys land from farmers. So securing land to build a citizen farm has become a very difficult problem. I think that the case study I introduced today is one of the most valuable samples of opening up to the public. And about the second one, collectivity and community practice is only occasionally seen. Yet, the reason is that there are still many public gardens that just grow vegetables. The main purpose is growing up their vegetables. So it's very hard to make communication with another people, especially in elderly people, I think. Thank you.
And yeah, let me also add one more question. So can you kind of explain about the relationship between the urban agriculture and water system, in the case study of Tokyo? And when you say that the natural infrastructure could provide some of the benefit to the existing urban agricultural practice, can you give the example of those kind of infrastructure?
Okay, thank you for asking about that. In this analysis I introduced today, what I called natural infrastructure is specifically trees and rivers, including urban parks, especially in relationship to water systems. In fact, today there is no direct relationship between urban agriculture and water. Nowadays, most of their fields use tap water. However, I think it is important to have water, agriculture land, and greenery all together as one landscape, like green infrastructure. And I also think it is important to have good agriculture land in close proximity to rivers and trees to prevent the spread of fire. Since it can be used as an evacuation shelter in times of disaster. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mei. Let me also share the other question to Dr. Danai. So from Professor Kim, Dr. Danai, you have nicely highlighted consideration to improve resilience of traditional agriculture for floodings, particularly with increasing frequent high intensity rain event under the climate change. So what are options to increase resiliency to increasing drought under changing climate?
I would say the first thing we need to understand the ecosystem that we live in first. And then how the second question is that how could you live with that system? For example, compared to the Japanese case study, when you talk about flood, we are totally different. The flood in Japan occurs sometime near winter season or something. I'm not sure. So the temperature is kind of a low, but in Thailand is always warm. So the flood is more of a, part of the natural rhythm. So we do not have any fear of drowning anything because the water is very warm compared to the temperate country. For example, in the US, flood happened during at the end of winter, when it snowed in the mountain, when they hit with the kind of heat wave and then snow up in the mountain kind of melt very quickly. But the temperature of the water is still very low. And then you cannot, or in case of the Netherlands, so they have a big storm in the winter. So the temperature of the water is very low. And then you cannot live in that water more than 10 minutes because you're going to drown because of the lower temperature. But in Thailand, it's really warm. So we have a more not many people talking about it, but we have a very distinctive ecosystem when you talk about flood, but it's actually another term that, not more like a negative implication. It's inundation. So when the water just flow over the land area. So that's one, that one is a case of central plain. So it's more like, in the technical term, we call it flood pulsing ecosystem. So during the wet season, we'll flood all the place. And then in the past, we live with that kind of flood because the rice evolved with that kind of ecological characteristic. So there are two types of rice that survive, and Ayutthaya built upon that type of rice, not the modern rice that we know. So it's called deep water rice and floating rice. If you read the Dalalubert, Dalalubert will mention that type of the rice that can growing like 50 centimeters each day, to go above the flood level. So the long history we live with that kind of environment, and then we have no problem. And then the early period, the Ayutthaya period, early period of Bangkok built upon that type of characteristic. And the modification, for example, you look at the way the Rangsit, that I forgot his name. He's the Dutch engineer who planned the Rangsit area. So that what, the next technology of, bring the water during the dry season and then drain the water during the wet season. So the first, the land reclamation project by the Dutch who know about the water, which is create a very vast area of Rangsit area to make the natural characteristic of the central plain is the dry season is the bad one because you don't have the water, and then the soil is hard, and then you cannot do anything. And then the wet season is more productive, more positive because the deep water rice, the floating rice. But the major benefit of flooding or inundation or flood pulsing is the fish. We have a lot of fish. And the fish is not included in the fish industry, for example, the dry smoke or kind of fish industry that we used to see it in the past. is not included in any national economics development plan. We look at the rice production with the green revolution. So we have a high yield variety that needs a lower level of the water. So you have a more yield than the floating rice and then the deep water rice. So you need the flood protection, irrigation system. That's kind of complicated. You said all that is in the economics development plan. But for my viewpoints, we turn in the wrong direction. So the problem of the flood in the Central Plain, happened from these kind of development. And then for this point, you living these kind of other landscape, and then you just need, to learn what the character, and then how would you build the technology that I would say no country would have that experience in this kind of, the living, switching between the wet and dry. The wet is no problem at all. The wet is all positive, but the dry one is a scary one. So the one that we need to solve the problem. And now we have the problem of that, we built the dam and then we think that we're going to solve the problem of drought. But now you can see that, how many dams are we going to build? We're not going to be able to solve the drought. So basically, I don't think that we can do 2 times rice, but we still promote that kind of thing, right? I think we can grow the rice just only once a year, and then we can feed the whole country, and also we can export it. So the excess rice, I would say we consume just only maybe 40% of the rice production, or even 30%, and then 70% we export. So we change the whole environment, change the whole ecosystem just to support rice industry for rice export, and then put so many area into flood risk because of the management. I would say it's a long story to talk about what happened in the Delta, and then what's we are facing right now. So there are something that we need to learn from ourselves, start to look at ourselves, and then, build the appropriate technology of how can we deal with that. Because the Dutch experts came to the place that I brought them to look at all these, the floating rice, deep water rice, and look at the livelihood of people live there. And they said, oh, we already know, how to deal with that. And then we have to think about, what kind of technology, to reintegrate human livelihood, and then all these the ecological dynamics, which is, both positive and negative. And I would say mostly all these research, from the Japanese, from Kyoto University in the 1950s, 60s, all those kind of things. But we just left all those research on the shelf somewhere. No one mentioned about that, the knowledge of, what the landscape or the ecosystem that we live in. So I would say we need to develop our own technology based on our own knowledge, but we are not, doing that kind of thing. We import, the technology of dealing with flood, with drought in a wrong way, from some place that, have no idea what flood pulsing ecosystem is. You can go to any US university, would be a small number of people talk about flood pulsing ecosystem. Start to have some books about riverscape, river in the landscape, talk about river continuities, but not in the large scale, like a Central Plain of the flood pulsing ecosystem in Thailand. So we have existing knowledge, but for ourselves, we have a very, very small number of small amount of knowledge that we try to understand ourselves first, and then looking at what kind of technology. I think we have ability and capacity to build that, but I would say we went and going in the wrong direction. We import all these technology that not going to work in this environment. That's my answer.
Okay, thanks, Danai. So I think we have like spent most of the time here for the good questions. And yeah, Asan, would you like to share some of the ideas also?
So first of all, I would like to thanks to all the speakers, ARIGA Sensei, Danai, and also Mei, for participating in this talk. I think for me, the resiliency, it's almost a philosophical concept. I think it's often that the term is described as the abilities to restage back to the balanced stage of the system. I really enjoy Danai's talk very much, that now the balance stage is also not a static stage. It's a very dynamic one as well. So that means we don't have a very unique static equilibrium, but maybe it's a dynamic one that is changing through times. I think the concept is very interesting. I don't know, I just have another thought, because we often mention that landscape or the surroundings is a living element, a living system, right? But to me, I mean, life has an end. So I don't know if we can prolong the life of our landscape. I mean, that would be another concept to discuss as well. Like, I mean, maybe this is all about the question relating to human perception, regarding to the surroundings and the perception of life. So anyway, I think thanks very much for a very well thought discussion and talk. And thanks to Fa to host a very informative talk with partner like this. So I hope this session will be put it online and shared in the future, so that there'll be more audience to learn. And I think one of the things that we can have in this kind of conversation is not the answer, but maybe the question. So perhaps we will stimulate the next question, and maybe that's the main goal of the education. So thanks everyone for participating in the session. Ajahn Pan, I see you are nodding. So thank you everyone, and well, that's a good ending for the summer break, right? Next week the new semester starts already, so we go back to the normal teaching time. So thanks everyone.